Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Para Talk. This episode we're going to get a bit weird. Not that we don't get weird every episode, but it get a bit weirder, shall I say. And I brought somebody on board for a returning visit because I think this episode needs a little bit of help. Who better to help me than Mr. Curious World himself? Are you there?
Yes, Reeves, how are you?
I'm all right. So
Thanks for having me on again.
that's all right, but this episode is... I need some help. I need some help with this episode because
All right.
when I first watched these videos on YouTube, I was completely lost for words, to be honest. I've seen some ghost stuff, but this is beyond the pale. If this is real, then we've definitely got some weird stuff going on. So for those that have got absolutely no clue what I'm talking about, to give you a little bit of background before we start to discuss the events and the strangeness that has been going on, it's been documented with this case. We're going to talk about Kent Burris, who is located in New England, in Carmel, Maine. And some of you might have already twigged going, I know about this. It's known as the Lamb House, and it's had some really, really weird stuff going on it. And I originally found these videos by accident, just by going down the YouTube black hole of YouTube and just clicking on stuff. And I found one video by him which purported to these strange apparitions in his home. And these apparitions were not seen at the time, or they were seen at the time, and he would either capture them after the fact and replay his video and see them, or that they would suddenly appear as if he went into a room, there was nothing in the room, and he would turn around and there would be all I can say is a black shadow behind him for a split second. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me put this out there. Are you familiar with what I'm on about?
Yes, I've watched a few videos from his channel. Some of the earlier ones, right up until the latest ones. I think they date back until about 2017.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite interesting, really. He started off by looking at the history of the town, Carmel.
Yeah.
Which is actually referred to as a village. I guess at one point it was a village, and they still call it a village, but it seems pretty large for a village. And he started off by looking at the history of it, but then he ended up bringing it back to his house where he lives, and that is where now, as far as I can see, most of his content is directed.
The thing is, to give, of course, the links to what we're discussing is going to be, when I publish this podcast, I'll have the links with it. So any of you guys out there that listening can just click and watch some of his videos. But I think that when I first saw his videos, it was one of the most recent ones where he started to capture these. I can only say that they are black masses that seem to appear out of nowhere, either stood next to him or behind him or peeking over the banisters. And also there's some of the most disturbing captures that he's got are these kind of apparitions of what clearly look like people, just kind of morphing in and out of of his house, out of windows and stuff. He has got an area in the house, that in his bedroom area, that seems to be the most active, where he gets all these kind of noises and apparitions that come from. But I think what we need to do is go back, as you say, to the history of the house and kind of look at what the house used to be. Because back in the old days, I mean, this house dates back to what predates, I think, the 1900s. Back in the old days, they would make a house, and over the years, well, much like anywhere, I suppose, they would add on to it, wouldn't they? They would sort of, as the family grew, they would kind of expand it and bring in different parts they need a kitchen, and they build a kitchen on, and the house would grow like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that there's multi levels here to this, whatever we can call it, this paranormal phenomenon is going on. Because there are investigators that have gone there and have had similar experiences. They've captured similar things, but Kent seems to be the main guy that this is kind of centered around. Now, as I say, we go back to the history a little bit, and we look for, where could this phenomenon have come from? So Edmund Lamb, he moved there to Maine back in the 1896. He was somebody that got married in his, I think his 20s. They had a child. They moved to Maine, and back then Maine, as you say, was a small village. He opened up a small shop so that he could make a living, and it was a little while longer when he got approved license to be an undertaker. Because back in those days, well, I suppose over here as well, in England, it was the same thing. They would lay a body out after a death. They would lay it in the home, and it would stay there for a number of days before they had the funeral. But also, I wasn't aware of this, but when they would prepare the body for burial in the earlier days, that was all done in the home as well. And it wasn't until like later years, the 19th century onwards, that they decided that, hey, we need to bring this out of the home and create a place where you can do it like a mortuary, funeral directors. And this is what Edward did. He needed a place to open up as a place where he could prepare bodies, because he was a licensed mortician and undertaker. So he bought the plot of land where the Lamb House is in Maine now, and he built this small building. And originally, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was a 2-story building. And it was like it had a downstairs and an upstairs. The downstairs, the lower part of it, was where all the preparation was done, and the upper part was where the families would go to pay their respects after all of the necessary things were done before the funeral would happen. So I'm just giving a bit of background at the moment so that we can talk further on what I think is possibly going on here. So as the house grew and as time went on, they expanded. In the village, now, back in those days, you could buy parts of someone else's building. So, for example, I own a building and it's got, I don't know, so many outbuildings. And you come to me and you say, hey, I want that outbuilding there, that garage or whatever. I want it to be part of my building. Then I'll sell it to you. You'll dismantle it and then go and attach it to your house. It's pretty straightforward. But people used to live like that, and that was perfectly normal. Well, this is what happened with the Lamb House. He bought the Lamb House is in 3 sections. You've got the front section, the middle section, and the rear section. And each section to the Lamb House is of a different era. And what Kent believes is that each section has its own paranormal phenomenon from different eras. But there is a one main reason that all this phenomenon is happening. And he believes that the basement, the lower area, where the bodies were prepared, that's where it's the catalyst. And you get that a lot, don't you? Where people say, oh, the phenomenon's the worst in the basement. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I actually didn't know about the history. I didn't know that it was a funeral home. That's interesting.
Well, I don't know all the info. I'm only sort of skirting over the main parts. But it was later on. It had a garage, an outhouse added to it, and it had a what they believe was part of a schoolhouse was used to attach onto the home, and that they think that all of these different parts of these different buildings all add up to the phenomenon they're experiencing today. But also, apparently back in the but they had a kitchen built onto it. But this is before the kitchen was built on. Because when he sold the business in I think it was 1920s, he sold the business, and the business was taken away from the home, from the Lamb House, and it was taken somewhere else and set up as an undertaker's, a funeral director's. And Edward, he turned that home into a home. So he converted it all of the, what was a working place, he made into a home to live in, and he resided there. I know that a girl called Rachel comes into it, and she was someone who lost their life many years before any of the kitchen or anything was built, and apparently her body was buried under the floor, and then later years the kitchen was built, and and that's why that all this activity has started up, because she is, restless, but also that there's other phenomenon going on there because of the building and what it was used for. It was a mortuary. There were bodies stored there. There was, there was preparation for burial, and then there's also the hearsay that Edward had something to do with the young girl's death, and that he buried the body under where the kitchen is now, and that the body is the skeleton would still be there. And this is all through Kent doing his research, because he's lived there since 2014. I'm not sure if he owns the property or he rents the property, but he has had a number of people coming in, doing vigils, doing their ghost hunts and stuff. So it is, and they have experienced stuff by themselves, but Kent is the main person who has been making his YouTube and documenting what he's been experiencing. And it's not only him lives there on his own, he lives there with his family, and they have also experienced stuff. I mean, there's one occasion where I think it's his daughter comes into the room, they're all around the breakfast table, and as she walks into the kitchen area where allegedly this girl's body would be under the ground, or the girl's like covered in static, or all her hair stood up on end. Now that could be a completely different reason for that. There could be some sort of environmental phenomenon, because things happen. We don't know everything. It's interesting that he would be doing the EVPs and he'd be getting voices saying, Edmund's going to hell, I'm under the floor, I'm down here, help me. With EVP, as you well know, it is very subjective. Do you not agree?
Yes, I do. I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into the EVPs in this case specifically, but I think a lot of the EVPs I've heard on the channel are questionable at best.
Mm.
I will say, there are one or two which really took me aback.
Yeah.
That made me think, wow, that really did sound like what they're claiming.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I do think that they are a little bit of a stretch.
I think that when you go into the realms of ghost boxes, spirit boxes, whatever you want to call them, and they're radio scanners that are scanning channels really, really quickly. Some people say, well, because it's scanning the channel really quickly, it's very hard to hear words. But our brains are very clever at hearing words when it only hears part of a syllable or part of a word or part of a pronunciation of a word. Our brains can put that word together because that's how we're programmed.
Yeah.
And I think that you've got devices like that. Sometimes they can be a hindrance. I have, as you well know, I have done extensive research with EVP, and I did capture voices, and those voices were as if somebody was talking into the microphone like you or I are right now.
Yeah.
But a lot of the voices that I captured, I didn't grade them at all. And they might have been a grade C or a grade D, but because they are so quiet and so garbled, that might be my brain saying, oh, I think I'm hearing something. So I wouldn't class them. I
mean, could it be possible? I did have a question regarding EVPs and how they're captured, because I don't know a great deal about that. So what are they scanning, and what are they capturing? Could it be that they're simply capturing radio stations and parts of radio stations and what people say over the waves?
Yeah. So when you have like a ghost box, okay, it's in this form. It's a radio. It's a radio receiver, and it's receiving radio signals. But the way that it's set is the scanner that scans for those channels is on constant scan, and it's speeded up. So it's scanning the channels really, really quickly. So it's going, and it's scanning them. And it's scanning them in such a way that it's meant to be so that vocalized words of somebody doing a show, talking about stuff, is not able to come through. So that's why it's scanning it really quickly.
Right.
I'm using words that are very generic here, but what the people that are apparently the dead, the spirits, they're able to pick up on these little fragments of words and string them together to make something that sounds like a word. That's why sometimes you hear these words that sound very mechanical, very metallic. is because they're using syllables or parts of a word to say something, to get a message across. Now, the problem is that how much of the work of that is our brain, is our subconscious doing to put that word together? This is the problem. If you record something, now, for example, I've quite a unique first name. There's not many people with my first name. If I went into a house and I asked a question and somebody answered or said my name, okay, if they said my name to me, is the chances of that, someone saying my name, is still quite, it could still happen, but the chances of it happening is quite low. So to me, that would be, oh, that's interesting. Quite scary, actually.
But it's also one syllable. So a single, very quick sound could be mistaken for a one-syllable name quite easily if your brain is that way inclined. If you want to try and make it into something.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with what you're saying. You're on the right path there, and this is the issue with EVP. I say I've done a lot of experiments with EVP. A lot of the EVPs that I captured over the years, I just binned because I'm thinking I can't be sure what that's saying. It's possibly saying, it could be possibly a word, it could be saying something, but I don't know. So it's not, to me, it's not evidence. What is evidence is when you ask a question and you get a direct answer. So if I say, what's the weather like, and it says sunny day, and it's a sunny day, to me that's more likely something that you're communicating with something. Or if you ask for a date, what's the date today, and it comes back, it's the 17th, and it's the 17th, then you're getting direct answers to direct questions. And this is what you have to do when you investigate. You can't just say, is anyone there? Oh, I thought I'd heard a yes. What's your name? Oh, I think that said Jack. Oh, what did you do, Jack? How did you die? Oh, did that say car? Must have been a car crash. You're putting all of the evidence to it. You're giving it a life. And you've got to be careful when you do that. And it's easily, I've done it when I've heard stuff and I've thought, I definitely, and I just play it, I play it to someone else and they'll go, no, that doesn't say that. That's saying that. They hear it completely differently.
Yeah, it's subjective, and if you can let your imagination run wild. But like I said, in the Ghosts of Maine YouTube channel, across the whole channel, like I said, I personally heard, I think it was 2 or 3 or maybe 4 that were really quite clear. They weren't quick, metallic sounding voices. They were very clear, softly spoken voices. And I think that's what you've got to differentiate.
Yeah, there's one that he captures, and you can clearly hear what sounds like a baby crying, and that is quite. And then you also hear after the baby cries, you hear someone saying like it's not here anymore, or the baby's gone, and you've got 2 things that are having a conversation as if they're aware that you're aware that you can hear it. And there was also another one that he captures the voice of a young girl, which he believes is this Rachel, because he's making videos now where he's trying to find out who this girl was, where she possibly could be. Is she under that house? Was she murdered? Who murdered her? Because he captured a lot of EVPs after he started to do research on, well, maybe this girl is buried under the house. He was capturing EVPs saying Edmund did it. Edmund will die. Edmund evil. So is there some way? I mean, you can hear that it's someone saying that, but in the context of, is that someone just on a radio show saying that, or is that something influencing those frequencies, those sounds to get a message across to where he's on the right path? But on the sense of EVP, I just want to move to the more dramatic style of evidence that Kent has caught, and that is the visual evidence. Now, I remember first seeing one of the videos, was a highlight reel of what he calls the shadow dude. And that gave me chills. The first time I watched that, I wouldn't be living in that house. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm moving out because I can't be dealing with the stress of literally walking around a corner and then there's a black mass stood there just motionless. And it seems to it seems to be all over the house, but mainly in the bedroom where he resides and sleeps. But and he believes that that's the kind of energy center, because he, on a number of occasions, two of the most scary clips that he's captured was one where he hears a noise upstairs. He goes to investigate. He walks up the landing, and he walks into the bedroom, and there's this black figure, shadow figure that's kind of sat kind of cross-legged on his bed, and he completely freaks out. And I can imagine, and he darts back out of the room, and he's on the landing, and you can hear in his voice that he's really, if that is acting, he's a really good actor. Yeah. And there's another one where he walks into the same room at a different time because he hears noises, and on one occasion there's this kind of black mass that's up on the blinds, and he stood by the doorway and he talks to it, and it's like elasticated. It kind of shoots down off the blinds into the floor. Yeah,
that was the strangest one for me. I mean, really, really strange, because it was so animalistic. And it does, at first glance, look like a cat. It would be a very big cat, to be fair. But he did make a follow-up video, and he explained that his cat was he does have a cat, but it was a lot smaller, and there's no way that could have been his cat. And it is one of the strangest claimed paranormal videos I've ever seen. It really is something. It's you have to see it, really.
It is unsettling.
Yes, it is.
The second most unsettling video I think I saw was the old man in the room.
Was that when he popped up from the right-hand side?
No, that was horrible. I was going to come to that one. That was horrible.
Sorry, I thought that's
this is the one where he opens the door and there's a man stood by the window, and as he stands by the window, it's almost as if this being, or whatever it is, realizes, like, oh, he's in the room, I got to get out of here. And it kind of gets sucked out the window. Merges into the window, and what's creepy is the blinds actually move. You can hear the blinds rattling as it goes through the blinds.
Yeah.
But you can see that the guy is wearing a pair of trousers. You can even see he's wearing a belt. He's got a shirt on and like I don't know, a sweatshirt or a jacket. He's got what looks like a facial hair, and you can see that he's quite old. And as he kind of transmorphs into this kind of, I don't know how you would explain it. It's just like smoke.
Yeah.
And out the window.
Yeah, and I every time I watch things like this, I always think, well, how could they have faked that? And it's possible, of course. You can fake all kinds of things, but considering the equipment that he has, I mean, he insists on using the camera that he has. He's not interested in upgrading for reasons that he explains. And I just don't. I mean, he would have to have quite a production team behind him, I think, to pull something like that off. Unless he's lying to us, he clearly doesn't have that.
I thought about this when I saw those videos. I took a step back and I thought, there are a lot of videos on YouTube that claim paranormal phenomenon, and there are some that seem like there's something happening, and that it's maybe not of any, it's not major. It's just a strange sound or a door opening, and it could be put down to something in the environment causing it, or it could be, it could be a ghost. And then you have the phenomenon out there where people post, and it's just so real, too good to be true, crazy stuff. And then you also get the episodes where people go and investigate places, and there's all this strange stuff going on. And the first thing I look for is, where's the disclaimer? And I'll look, and if it's got entertainment on it, I'll know it's not purposes. Real. I know it's made up. It's just there to scare you, and it's made as a real life thing, and so I just immediately discount that. But with Ken, as you just brought up, the equipment he uses is so basic. He uses a small little handheld camera, which is not state of the art in any way. So it is quite low quality. Some of the phenomenon he captures using that camera is, if you had to work that file and make it, do what you need to do with it, I think the what you'd have at the end of it would be even worse than the quality that he's uploading at the moment. So I understand, obviously, the thought process of, as you just brought up, where he says the reason I use lower quality equipment is for easier to capture phenomenon. And there is some, I think, you see, I'm a little bit on the fence with that, because I understand that the mindset. Yeah, I understand the mindset. I would say some of my EVP, I've just used a normal tape player and cassettes, and I've had voices. Some of my voices I've captured, I've done in a full professional studio with professional equipment, and I've captured voices. But there is a mindset out there to say that the higher the quality of the equipment, the less chance you're going to get. Well, not the less chance, but the less phenomenon you might capture, because that equipment is very good at filtering out any nonsense. It's designed to only capture what it needs to capture. I think that using high quality equipment, if you do capture phenomenon, the chances are it could be anything in the sense of interference is less. So the more chance that it's what you're capturing is external.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, I can only repeat what you said, really. It's the high end stuff. It is designed to block out all of the visually. I guess it would be the interference. It'll be less grainy. Your everything is flatter.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Yeah, maybe I'm talking nonsense. I don't want to.
No, I know where you're going. I know what you're on about. I think that what the point is that what Ken is using is getting him results. So, like anything, if you're using something that gets you results, my late friend Lou Gentili, okay, he was like an EVP master. He took a lot of flack for some of the EVPs, because people would say he's just making them up. They're not real EVPs. They're just nothing. It's just him hoping and wishing that there was something. But I've heard some of the EVPs he's captured, and I must admit I didn't agree with everything that Lou captured was an EVP. Some of the sounds that he would capture were completely weird, and some of them were growls, weird kind of chanting sounds. It weren't even words. They were, well, it sounded like words, but of a language that I had no idea what that language was. And then some of the EVPs that he would capture would be, you would think somebody was in the room talking. I remember him playing me an EVP, him on an investigation. He was doing an investigation with a team in Philadelphia, where he was located, and he was on an investigation. And I remember him messaging me from, he was outside having a smoke, and he sent me a message saying, "Oh, I'm on an investigation." And I said, "What?" He said, "It's a demonic thing or something, allegedly, and we've got a team here." And he sent me some EVPs that he'd captured. And he sent me them, and he didn't tell me anything about the EVPs, just sent me them. And I played them, and I'm like, well, it's just a bunch of people talking. He said, "Right, well, you hear that, yeah?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's just some people in a room talking." He said, "Yeah, well, at the time, there was just one person in there, and no one was talking." And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, that's pretty good EVP, because that sounds like a bunch of... But the thing is, really difficult to find out what they're talking about. It was, where you... when you go to a party and everyone's having a good time and everyone's chatting, and unless you home in on a particular conversation, you can't make anything out. It was like that.
Right.
It was like that. It was as if a group of people were in a room, a large room, with a high ceiling. You could hear the resonance of the voices, and it was as if the room was not wallpapered, it was not carpeted, because it was you could hear there was quite a heavy resonance and in echo. And at the time, an investigator was just in there on their own with a recorder, and it sounded like there was it was like a party was going on. So yeah, I mean that's indisputable that they've captured something. Now, where that comes from, I don't know. I don't believe that all EVP is random radio signals or stuff like that. But I do think that we have to, when it comes to the phenomenon, and even with something like this case we're talking about, I do think that we have to look at ourselves as part of the haunting and as part of the reasoning behind why things are happening. Because I think that where we go into a place, for example, Kent is living in a house where he doesn't know from 1 minute to the other, he could literally turn around and there's some thing stood behind him. Or he can take a picture, and one of the scary ones, he's got his daughter. I think his daughter's having a birthday party. They're in the kitchen. And remember that the kitchen is one of the most recent additions to the building. And they're in the kitchen, and they are it's just a picture of his daughter with some birthday presents and some balloons.
Oh, yeah, I know which one you...
And there's a face in the window looking in, and it's a girl's face. You can see it's a girl's face. Now, there's two reasons. That has to be a person outside looking in, and he showed the window outside where, if it were a child, there's no way a child could be that tall unless they're stood on a box. And there's a lot of work to go to. Or there has to be somebody, you think to yourself, okay, it's just a person in the room and their face is being reflected.
Yeah.
But the image isn't inverted. It's as if someone's outside looking in.
Yeah, I originally thought that may have been a doll's face. I thought maybe there was a doll sat on the table.
Okay, yeah.
But when I looked closer, I couldn't see the doll in the room. I thought that, maybe she's hid behind something. But when I actually looked closer, the face is actually quite high up on the window, and therefore, if it was a doll in the room, you would have been able to have seen the back of the doll's head, which you cannot. So yeah, that is another one that's very strange.
Have you seen the videos that he's got of the independent investigators that come round to the house and do their vigils?
I've seen a couple of them. I saw the one, a lady called Fate.
I think she gets her ankle grabbed. Feels like someone's grabbing her ankle, pulling her ankle. And there's another person who gets, I think they pushed or poked, and they're in the cellar.
Right, yeah. Well, he gets pushed in the cellar, doesn't he, at one point?
Yeah, they capture that black thing that he kind of believes that black mass that is in the basement is connected to what they captured upstairs. He captured upstairs in the bedroom.
Right, I see. So he thinks it's the same apparition in the bedroom and down in... Right, okay.
He thinks that all of this phenomenon that is going on in the house has something to do with the basement. And from his research, he knows that the basement used to be a place where deceased bodies were prepared for burial.
That they captured some interesting EVPs down in the basement, and they were speaking to people, and allegedly there were a couple of EVPs, clear ones. I think this was the episode that I heard a couple of really clear ones that, to my mind anyway, they were speaking that somebody who had been killed down, they didn't make it clear how they died. They were trying to sort of get that information out, but that was never made clear. But some of the things they said were quite clear, and I think the year that was given was, I personally thought it was 1867, but they heard it as 1967. Obviously, there's a massive difference, but it would be interesting to go back and research, really look into that. But he claimed that he couldn't find the records from 1967 to local records. But I find it difficult that you wouldn't be able to find that kind of information. I mean, it wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things. I think that information could be found if he dug a little deeper. That's interesting.
I think there is a connection with, if this young girl Rachel was murdered and buried under which would have been outside at the time when she was killed, because there would have been no kitchen there. It would have been outside next to the house. Maybe there's a connection with the basement and the EVPs that they've captured. You see, I think the answer lays with who lived in the house before. I think that there is a story there. Well, I'm going on the pretext that everything we're talking about has happened, is real. We know for a fact that the guy that lived there first used the building had a building built there, built the land, and he was a mortician, a funeral director. We know all that. That's all documented. But did he, and I'm just putting this out there, did he murder someone? Did he kill someone? Did he kill a girl? And did he bury the body? Did he hide the body? And this is the thing. And is this the reason why all of this stuff is going on? Or is there something more to the fact that these buildings, or this building, wasn't built at the same time? Every portion was 3 sections. Every section of that building has a different history. Yeah. And I don't know about you. What's your thoughts on buildings and paranormal phenomenon? I'm in the mindset that we can imprint our emotions on a place, on a building. Do you feel the same?
I think we touched upon this before, the stone tape theory.
Yeah.
Of if something extremely emotive happens in a building, I think it's possible that, and I think it does happen, that all that emotion and hatred, anger, pain, whatever it is, leaves an imprint on the building. And I know some people think it's absolute nonsense, but in my mind it makes sense. And I think that does happen. When you get people who say they are clairvoyant and they walk into a room and they can feel the energy, I think that's what they're talking about. If something awful or emotional has happened there, that's what they can feel. Now, if a girl was murdered in that house in a horrible manner, then it would make sense that these things are going on.
Yeah, that's true. I also think that bringing all these different parts of a home together from different homes and different environments, different people with different belief structures, the way that they see the world, how they lived in those environments, how they imprinted themselves on those environments. I think that when you put all that together, maybe something there as acted as a catalyst, where Kent now is experiencing phenomenon that is completely bizarre. And as I say, that he does take a lot of flack, because some people out there say, oh, it must be fake because you're the only person that gets this phenomenon. You're the only person that seems to capture it. Well, let's be honest, right? I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment, because people now know me for long enough. I've been doing this for long enough to know that I'm quite a logical person when it comes to looking at phenomena. And I always try to find a natural explanation, but sometimes there isn't one. So you have to say, I don't know. Most of the time I say I don't know. But the fact is that when you look at Kent's stuff and the phenomenon that he's captured, he lives there. He's there all the time. That people that come in and investigate are only there for a short period of time. And maybe this phenomenon, as it looks, doesn't happen all the time.
No.
It's very sporadic.
As it often is.
Yeah. And you touched on something that I was going to say earlier, that there was that video, and I advise anyone to click on the link that I'll add with this episode to go and watch some of Kent's stuff that he's captured. There's a clip where he walks into a room and there is clearly nothing in the room, and then he turns to his right and there's someone stood there out of nowhere. It's just a black shadow thing, and it scares him, and he steps back out of the room, and you think, well, it's just, but when you look through the crack in the door, you can see it moving around in the room.
Yeah.
And then it just vanishes. And oh my God, oh wow. Yeah. I was just like, no, I'm going out for a walk. If all this phenomenon that is happening, I have to say, hands down, the guy is brave. But on the other side of it, if you have to live with this phenomenon, I suppose, like anything, you can get used to it.
Yeah, if you have no other options.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Go and live on the street?
Yeah,
you're just going to deal with it. So yeah, I think that I think that definitely there is history to this house. There are some really good documentaries. Well, I say documentaries, videos, accounts of that he does do his research. But I do think that he does get sometimes a little bit lost in reading a little bit too much into some of the messages. I don't like to be front loaded with EVPs. I don't want someone to tell me what it says.
Exactly.
I want to hear what it says.
That's exactly where I am with it.
Yeah. If I gave you an EVP and say, listen, it says like help me, and it's just like wah, wah,
exactly.
And you go, oh yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, that's definitely help me. And I've just told you what to hear. But if I just give you an EVP and just say, what does it say? And then you say it says biscuit. You know?
Yeah, quite. They do. He does. He puts captions, doesn't he, to tell you what the EVPs are, and expecting you to take it as gospel. But clearly, it could be almost.
I understand the reasoning behind that because he wants people to. If you're very enthusiastic about what you're doing and you really want people to be on board with you, you're going to want to help them to understand what you're trying to convey. But when it comes to EVP and it comes to any phenomenon, you can't be front loading people, because if you front load people, then you've already just told them what to hear and what to see or whatever. Yeah. If I have a piece of phenomenon and I don't tell you what to expect, and you see something and go, what was that? Yeah. And then that's your brain figuring it out. If I say, well, if you look there's a little old man, he jumps out that way. I've already told you what to see. So, the whole thing of you experiencing something and getting a real answer has been lost. So I'm a bit off with that. So yeah, but I don't think that, I can't think of another case. Well, I can actually, but not to this extent where people capture these shadow. But what do you think they are? Do you think that that's? Do you think that that's that what you're seeing there is possibly a ghost, or do you think that there's something? Do you think is it black? Is it evil? Is it what? Because he's captured them downstairs in his front room,
quite possibly
at the table, sat on the chairs.
Yeah, quite possibly. I have seen similar videos with similar apparitions, but nothing as clear as that. It's quite possibly real apparitions. But the most interesting thing, like going back to what you were saying earlier, or one of the most interesting things, was the man stood in the window looked like a modern man. Yeah. So going back again to the different areas of the building that have different eras, do we have a cross section of eras of different apparitions, different spectres from different times in history?
Possibly.
That's really interesting too.
He has had people in there that say that a bedroom area is some sort of energy. I don't like using the word vortex or portal. I don't know what it is about those words. When I say those words, they're like, don't want to use that word. Portal. I just don't know what it is. I just say it's some epicenter.
Yeah.
I just don't want to use I think that words like vortex and portal have kind of weird connotations.
Yeah.
Doorway.
Yeah. If the, going back to the stone tape theory, if the energy was already there from 100, 150 years ago, did it then, in the following generations of people who lived there, then attract them as they passed on? Did it attract them back to the house because it was already there, like you say, acting as some sort of vortex to bring them back to the place?
Everyone growing up has a place where, so sure you're the same. I do. I have a favourite teenage home. The place,
house you grew up in usually is.
Yeah. Where I grew up as a teenager, from like my late pre-teens through to my sort of 14, 15 years old. The house that I lived in then, that's where I kind of became who I am now, I think, or I started to become who I am now. And that's where I experienced all of the memories and, my first computer and all that sort of stuff. And I think that you can imprint in a unconscious way your footprint on that on that kind of. Oh, here's a side note. I'm going to go on a tangent. I have to go on a tangent now. Here's a little bit of a hearsay. That house that I grew up in was the house that I had my UFO sighting from, and also my strange sleepwalking. I told you about this, didn't I? My sleepwalking weirdness in that house. And
I don't think you did.
All right. Okay. So back in the early 80s, all my listeners are going, "Oh my God, not this story again!" Every time he tells the story, I have to say it now because otherwise I'm going to tell you and I'm going to be talking about stuff and you're going to be going, "I don't know what he's on about. He's just talking waffle." So this house I grew up in, I had a sighting with a friend and my dad. We saw some lights in the sky and they were very unusual. They made a triangle and then they stayed in the sky for about 15 minutes and then they all flew off in different directions. And the one at the top just shot straight up in the sky. And it was faster than any plane or any helicopter or any balloon. It just doink, it was gone. Very bizarre. My dad even logged a report with the UFO people because he was a member of the British UFO network at the time. Because he was into all that, Von Daniken and all those people. He read all their books. So Jacques Vallée, those kind of big authors back then in the 70s, late 70s. Anyway, so I had this sighting with my friend. So it wasn't just me; it was my friend and my dad, and it was all different, And a few months after, I started to have these bouts of I called it sleepwalking because I don't know what else to call it. It was I would end up like walking around the house, and my mum would find me. My dad used to come back to England for 3 months at a time. He used to work in America, so he was a truck driver. He used to drive the big logging trucks down from Canada down through into Washington, and with these big trees on. So he was away for like 6-7 months of a year, and he'd come back for like 3 months and then go off again. So my mum, it was just my mum, me, and my brother in this big detached 3-bedroom house. Very nice, great, loving it. It was a fantastic time of my life. One of the highlights of my life. Loved it. Growing up, computers, video games, Atari, loved it. Late 70s, early 80s, best time. And I had these bouts of sleepwalking, and my mum took me to the doctor because she thought I had something going on with my head. And the doctor did an examination, said, "Your son's fine. I think it's more he's growing up, his hormones and all that. His body's changing." And I experienced these these bouts of sleepwalking, but semi-conscious sleepwalking, where I would go to sleep and I would hear clocks ticking, and they would get louder and louder and louder, and I don't know where the clock sound came from. And then I would find myself, I would either be semi-conscious around the house. I remember seeing like the bathroom, or I'd see the kitchen, and I wasn't like I was. It wasn't like I was in control. I was like in my head, and I would see it through like a rainbow of colours. It wasn't like I was. It was very strange. It was like I was in one of these multicoloured footballs, looking out, and it was moving around the house. It was very strange. Now, okay. Now, I'm just going to say that, like any case, anything like that, like this, like we're talking about right now, I could turn around and go, "Well, clearly, I was abducted by aliens." I could say that, and I could go off and tell everyone about that. I don't know what it was I experienced. I must probably experienced some sort of sleepwalking paralysis growing up thing, which all kids, maybe not all kids, but a lot of kids maybe experience. I also experienced. There is a connection here. I am going to a thing. I always end with a connection. Okay. But one of the things I did experience was sleep paralysis, and I would wake up in the night, and I didn't used to sleep with my curtains drawn. So our house backed onto a large cricket field, so there was just moonlight coming in. There was nothing out there, just field, and it used to illuminate my room. And I remember waking up in bed and seeing, looking by the corner, always in the corner of my room. It was always in the same place in my room, and I would look and I would see this really kind of tall, dark, shrouded thing. It was black. No, it was just It was like this. Must have been. It was as big as my wardrobe, and my wardrobe must have been nearly to the ceiling. So it must have been 7 foot. And I was a kid, so it looked huge to me. And And I remember looking at it, and the more I looked at it, the more I got scared. And it didn't move. It didn't say anything. It didn't motion or anything. It was just there in the corner of my room. And the reason that I could make it out was because my room was illuminated, and it was darker than the rest of my room. So it kind of had a shape.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And the more I looked at it, the less I could move, the less I couldn't talk, I couldn't shout. All I could do was just lay there and just sort of just cry and go back to sleep, like look down under my covers or something, you know. And this went on for a while, and I got to the point where my mum was, I was like, you know, about to sleep walking, and I had to go to the doctors. And as much as it started, and then it just suddenly stopped. It lasted for a few months, and the doctor put it down to sort of growing up and being a kid, and you know, all those things that you experience growing up, you know, all hormonal changes and stuff. But I had sleep paralysis again later on in my life, and I think I said this on another episode, but it was more the sense of, there are a few people actually since I've been doing these episodes where how common it is.
I was going to say, there's a lot of sleep paralysis stories that involve things stood in the room, what they usually call shadow people. That's quite a common thing, which is really odd. I mean, for people the world over, from different generations to come up with the same or very similar stories, that's really strange. I mean, that's an episode in itself as well.
My last sleep paralysis was back in 2014, I think it was. It was late. Yeah, must have been 2014. I woke up and I felt as if I was having a snooze in the afternoon, and I woke up and I felt as if there was a person like led on me with their hands around my wrists and their knees in my back, and I could feel the hands, I could feel the pads of the fingers. It was like Hulk hands. Their hands were massive, and it was like, I'm an average sized bloke. I'm not massive and I'm not tiny, but the hands that were around my wrists were like 4 times the size of my hands, and I could feel them. I could feel the hands gripping into my wrists, and it was like an invisible hands, and it was like, it was weird. And I just thought, I'm in a paralysis. I got to relax. And I relaxed, and as I relaxed, it faded away.
Yeah, I've suffered with sleep paralysis. I've never had. It's simply just been a case of not being able to move and being, you know, completely awake and aware of what's going on, but not being able to move or let anybody else know that you're going through this. Because there's been times when I've tried to turn to my wife and get her attention, but you can't do it. But no, I've never had any people stood in the bedroom or shadow people stood nearby while I've been going through it. It's just been me and not being able to move.
Horrible feeling. Yeah. So anyway, I think we've reached the end of this episode. But I do want to get your I do want to get your feedback and your conclusions on what you think it could possibly be going on here, that what we've talked about. I know we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, we have really.
He's got hours and hours and hours of content.
I think it's about 3 or 4 days. I had a quick glance over the length of the videos, and they're all a good hour each.
Yeah, they are. So I would advise anyone, personally, you never know. There's a full episode here for the Phantom Chronicles. You've got one. Get one on the Phantom Chronicles.
Yeah,
it's enough work. You got enough content.
I could definitely include it as a segment for sure. I mean, I could include it as an entire hour-long episode. Yeah. It just depends on how many other people have now covered it. But going on,
I was going to say, what's your final thoughts on this? Where do you think it's? Where do you think it is? What's going on there?
Well, based on what we can see, and making the assumption, assuming that we're not being all taken for a ride, I think it all does revolve around the fact that it was a funeral home. People were there, and I think that the apparition is from that time. If it's true that there was a girl who was murdered there and buried in the basement, I think that is a separate entity. I think they are two different things. I think the shadow dude and the girl in the basement are two different entities from two very different times. But yeah, I think the shadow person is from a time that's later in history. I don't just judging by the way that it looks, how clear it is to see it, and the way that it's dressed as well. It looks like very much like a modern man.
Well, I have to say that I'm completely taken with the case. I do find it completely interesting. If it's all real, then wow, this Kent has got some mega evidence.
Yeah,
the best I've ever seen. If it's made up, then it's a lot of work to make something up and to keep it going for so long, unless you're making a ton of money off of it. And I don't think he is. I think he lets people come and investigate. Fair enough. If they make a donation, they make a donation. Yeah. But if I don't think he's getting. He's going to be retiring to the Bahamas anytime soon. So I think that it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes. I really advise anyone, and we've literally just scratched the surface of this whatever it is. I'm going to put a link in the description. You need to click on it. You need to go watch it, and you need to go watch more of his stuff, because it will suck you in, and you will, once you see those videos that he's captured, you're going to be, I think, like us, scratching your head.
Yeah, and it's a shame that, in a way, that you haven't got feedback from people on the channel. There are no comments. He's got all the comments turned off every video. Now that may have been because he's experienced a lot of hate. We all know that happens.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's why he's turned the comments off. But yes, it's so there's no two-way conversation at any point going on in the comments. He doesn't obviously get involved with conversations over social media.
Yeah, I would like I would like to get him on Power Talk. I'd like to get him on and have a chat.
I'm sure.
But yeah, maybe that'll happen. Maybe I should reach out to him. I think what I'll do is I'll shoot him an email and see what happens. See where that goes, because I'd love to pick his brains. Yeah. As I say, we've only scratched the surface, and I'd like to get his whole take on it. As I say, you know, there are days worth of videos on the channel, but who's got 2 or 3 days to go through all of them? You know, we only watch a few, and we watch what we think's most important. But it's definitely interesting. So for you, what's your plans for your channels? Have you got anything? I mean, I know you're very busy at the moment working on some new episodes, and these episodes do take a while.
That's really all I've been doing. I'm kind of ashamed to come to the table today with no new material, but I am just working hard. I'm doing a lot of writing. I'm just writing a lot. What I've been doing lately, I've been writing episodes, several of them, rather than just writing one and then editing it and putting it out. I've actually got about 5 or 6 in the bag now, which I can now start to work on and put them out in a reasonably timely fashion, rather than having to wait months and months. But for the Phantom Chronicles channel, I'm currently working on a Ghost Stories of Canada video. I'm hoping that I know that will be a 3-part series, because obviously it's such an expanse. And, you know, there's no way that I'm going to be able to condense it. I don't want to do a 5 stories from Canada and be done. I want it to be a 3-part series. So that's what I'm working on currently. And after that, I'm going to be working on Ghost Stories of the 21st century. Because so many of the stories that I've covered and so many of the stories that other people cover are from the 20th and 19th, mostly.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
Very few ghost stories that are told from the last 20 years. So I'm going to be looking at.
Well, that's good. That's awesome. I'm looking forward to that because I am a fan of your channel. I highly recommend anyone else. The links will be in the description. Go check out Curious World. Go check out Phantom Chronicles. You're going to love them, and then they're well put together, well narrated, and some of them are really interesting stories. But as for this episode, I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember paratalkpodcast.com for other episodes, and also Paratalk now has got a YouTube channel. That will be in the link will be in the description. So if you prefer to subscribe to YouTube, you can do. Not all of the episodes are on there at the moment. I'm kind of uploading them a little bit at a time just to sort of give myself a bit of a buffer so that I can catch up with myself. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please, wherever you may be, give us some feedback. It's really appreciated, and it really helps the channel grow. And all great feedback is superb. Anyway, it's bye from me, and it's also bye from
goodbye from me.
The man himself.
Well, thank you very much for having me again.
That's all right. You're quite welcome. I'm sure you'll be back again. As I say, we've already talked about some other ideas, so we've got some other ideas in the bag. So no worries there. And until next time, see you soon.
Goodbye, everybody.